Welcome to my Asians Above Stereotypes and Beyond Skin Color segment. I'm Dr. Elaine Disporandon, the founder of Anak 501c3 public charity for bereaved families, and I call this presentation Peeling the Banana and Cracking the Coconut. During this recording that's taking place over Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May. But I'll be releasing this recording later on, closer to Filipino History Month in October of this year. Today, I'll be speaking with you about the term model minority, as well as address the tiger mom concept, in addition to revealing my own narrative about being a quote unquote model minority from my childhood to adolescence to college and grad school through early adulthood and now as a college faculty member. And I invite those who attend my live presentation to share your own experiences by dropping in the chat, or those who are watching the YouTube version to post appropriate comments underneath this video. And if you do, you have a chance to win my latest Anak book, which actually introduces grief diversity, including among Asian Americans. But my call to action at the end of my talk is for us to break the stereotype. And I first want to introduce myself as a first generation Asian American citizen who was born in Germany, which at the time at Ramstein Air Base in then West Germany was considered as American soil. I was actually born in the largest military overseas hospital, thanks to my parents, my father who served in the Air Force and my mother who served as a registered nurse. They both grew up in the Philippines before immigrating to the United States in the 1970s, and they met in Dallas, Texas, which comes full circle because after moving around from a different country to stateside, we ultimately ended up back closer to their stomping grounds. I live by my faith and am inclusive with whom I serve and befriend. I've been teaching with Purdue Global's Education and Communication Department for a year since 2023, starting with communication undergraduate courses, but also going into the Doctor of Education in Leadership and Innovation Applied Research Design courses. I founded a NotCo nonprofit at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which I serve as a certified grief counselor specializing in pet loss grief support. And I also designed and now teach my grief diversity curriculum to fellow certified grief counselors through the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals, American Academy of Grief Counseling. My corporate executive chef husband, who also was an educator in culinary arts, is a proud parent to our cats and angels along with me in the Texas Rio Grande Valley. Although we share the same Catholic Christian faith, we are an interracial marriage with him being Mexican American. But nowadays we see more Asian representation in the media and more Asian Americans as characters or even reality TV stars, including in this Bravo TV show with the last season of The Real Housewives of Dallas, in which Dr. Tiffany Moon had entered at the beginning of the coronavirus shutdown and was deeply affected working in the front lines, but also in being part of this so-called friend group on TV. And full transparency, I don't really watch this show, but during that one season that Dr. Moon appeared, I did tune in because I wanted to see how she was portrayed as an Asian American. And she's quoted here to say during a confrontation from a racial um, situation, I think one of the other housewives had posted on social media, she said to this woman, Asians are sometimes considered the model minority because we tend not to make a stink about things. I think the time has come for Asians, for Black people, for everyone to speak out. This is America. It's 2020. We can do better. And this prompted me to delve more into the model minority concept. And it also came up during my grief diversity research. And I've classified the model minority into three different sections that we'll cover in the next couple of slides based on stereotype. Model minority may come from, here in red, the pressure to overachieve. And here in green, segueing that overachiever mentality into being hardworking, thus successful and reaping those rewards. And in the blue section, model minorities may also be considered as do-gooders or irrelevant, meaning that they may tend to stay under the radar and not want attention drawn to themselves and not even defend themselves when they are being discriminated. So here are the advantages versus the disadvantages of model minority. Bearing in mind in red, many Asian Americans may come from families with exceedingly high expectations. They may grow up to develop discipline and hard work. However, they may also encounter intergenerational trauma, including being pressured to pursue a lifestyle that they themselves would not choose to follow. In green, we have hard workers who succeed and reap rewards, which does tie in with the red category. But in this case, having that pressure to overachieve also is assumed to mean that they will succeed. Therefore, there may be some recognition and affluence that comes with that territory, but at the same time, it can be overwhelming with having the pressures of demanding jobs, but also a personal life to handle if they have a family to support. And last but not least, in blue, Asian Americans may tend to do the quote unquote right thing to stay under the radar in order not to draw attention to themselves. So an advantage from that, of course, would be deterring from the limelight or the spotlight, so to speak. But then they could be targeted for discrimination. And there have been more hate crimes on the rise at the beginning of the pandemic, and of course, a lot of the public interest had been on African American victims, including George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And those were tragic, as well as those that targeted Asian Americans. And many came forward as a result of the African American hate crimes. But it's just barely been a few years with more Asians being targeted, including being blamed for the coronavirus entering our nation. But now my my people from my culture may be more inclined to defend themselves. And throughout this recording, I hope that you consider your own experiences if you either have gone through any of the above, the pressure to achieve, the reaping the rewards of hard work, the doing good by society, or if you've observed it from somebody else, whether it be the Asian American or Pacific Islander communities, or if you yourself have gone through it in your own families, your own work, and your own experiences with outside groups. I also want you to keep in mind the tiger mom. You may have heard this concept. I don't know if any of you have had a tiger mom or if any of you yourselves would be considered as tiger moms. But tiger moms are characterized by cultural dimensions of high power distance, her way or the highway, and also masculine culture, not necessarily meaning that tiger moms are manly, but masculine cultures value achievement, value the hard work, value the recognition. And also tiger moms can be very long-term oriented, setting sight on the future benefits, which is why they may seek to shape or mold their children in a certain way according to their own plans that are predetermined. Tiger moms may be known for being disciplinary and micromanagers, meaning that they want their children to strive to succeed and may even hover over their shoulders to make sure that they are keeping up with their work or their lessons or their activities. They may be considered as what other cultures may call the helicopter mom, but the helicopter moms are known for being protective as well over their children. Tiger moms are definitely achievements driven. They want to, have what we hear now in social media, the flex. They want to boast about their children. They want to speak highly of them, among others, probably even one up other tiger moms or other parents. And they want to prepare for the future, hence their long-term orientation. And they want to see that they have indeed done a good job with raising their child when they see the fruits of their labor being reproduced through successful careers that may include lucrative pay, for example. However, tiger moms have ranked high in shaming, but also on another extreme, warmth. So there may be a dichotomy with tiger moms guilt tripping their kids, but also having a level of maternal care towards them. Because even though they may have high goals for their children and future generations, they still have that affection for their kids. But even if they feel that way, they may not always show it. So they may not always feel emotionally supportive. They may have what's called tough love. These are the articles and books that I consulted for the minority model and the tiger mom concepts. And I give you your opportunity to let us know if you can relate to either model minorities or the tiger mom concept, or are these new to you? And if you haven't gone through them yourself, do you know anybody else who has? I'm going to share with you my own unique experience because I haven't gone through the extremities of being a model minority or having a tiger mom, but I have had my share of some of these characteristics that were described. Again, I mentioned to you that my family, my immediate family of origin, included my airman dad and my nurse mom, which the month of this recording in May happens to be Nurse Appreciation and Military Appreciation Month, and also for us fellow educators, Teacher Appreciation Month. So kudos to all of us who have handled any of those careers. A good takeaway that I have from my parents' early teachings and raisings of me is that I tend to set the bar high for myself, and like them, followed in their example of leading a strong work ethic. However, this also led me to being a perfectionist, an overachiever, and hard on myself if things aren't perfect. So even though I'm in my early 40s and I have been established in my higher ed career for almost 2 decades now, I am just barely practicing the value of progress over perfection. And when I was in pre-kindergarten and elementary school, I already exemplified high standards. My mother had actually taught me how to read at the tender age of 2, so when I entered preschool and kindergarten, none of my peers knew how to read yet. And my father actually taught me math before kindergarten, before we even had to learn them in first simple mathematics in first grade and second grade, and also government in second grade. So when we had the president's State of Union address, he would have me watch it with him. In junior high, he was so excited about having me color coordinate the U.S. map with which parties were winning which state during the presidential election, for example. So my parents exposed me to valuable education, not just in the school, but also at home at an early age. But aside from academics, my parents also wanted my sister and me to lead an active lifestyle. My dad and my aunt had taken us to aerobics classes when they were really trending in the 1980s. And my mother would do aerobics videos at home, and both of my parents enrolled my sister and me in gymnastics and skating and different activities to keep us active, to have us be a child and enjoy growing up. Now, in terms of discrimination, I suppose that my first bullying experience that I can recall was in elementary school, including when my fourth grade classmate asked me what I was, and when I told him Filipino, he started calling me jalapeno because he thought that's what Filipino sounded like. And there was a hand gesture that some kids would do with their eyes where they would raise their eyes up and say that they're Chinese, and then slant them down to say that they were Japanese. And it just, wasn't the most pleasant experience to be around in a majority white populated elementary school. However, the activities that I was involved in still gave me opportunity to be involved, including both athletics and fine arts clubs, but still having that influence of my own parents. They wanted me to be in band in middle school and high school, so I took up the clarinet and was also encouraged to be one of the few to play bassoon, but I quit for the sake of not having that commitment and hanging out with my cool friends at the time. And my dad coached me from the sidelines at my tennis matches, and our neighborhood actually included a lot of other tennis players. A lot of my relatives are tennis players. My uncle on my mom's side actually at age 75 beat out men as young as their 20s in a tennis tournament in Baltimore a few years ago. And our next door neighbor and her daughter were head tennis coaches at their respective high schools, but my favorite sport was basketball. And now I am religious, but growing up, I felt like it was more of my parents' desire than mine to go through the sacraments. So ultimately, I chose it, but at the time, I somewhat may have bared a bit of resentment towards my parents because I just wanted to have the freedom to do what I wanted to do at the time. I honestly was defiant against their authority growing up. So probably not the typical model Asian child, I have to admit. And I had a diverse group of friends with whom I still keep in touch. But if I were to speak specifically of Filipino Americans during the time I was growing up, we probably were not considered the model minority among other Asian groups, because some of my Filipina American friends actually dropped out of school because they were cohabiting with a boyfriend or got pregnant at a young age or simply didn't want to keep going through school. So I tended to be the overachiever compared to my other Filipino American peers at the time, who not only graduated from high school, but also college and ultimately 3 degrees thereafter. But during my undergrad and graduate school, I observed more mixed perceptions of my own success, and also with being a minority among a majority white population still, because I stayed in my hometown to appease to my parents, but again, I wanted to be more independent and ultimately moved out during my college career like a lot of children do, even though my parents wanted me to stay with them. And to be honest, I actually did move it back in with them in between my degrees and during my sabbatical for my doctoral degree, which is very helpful. I respect and appreciate my parents for still offering to help me out to support my education. However, at the time, I really did feel like my mother was not proud of me because I did not pursue a healthcare field like she and many of our relatives have, because I do have family on both sides who practice medicine, or I did not go into a lucrative career that would pay me tons of money. I also felt like I was a joke among their friends, Filipino and otherwise, because I was a professional student, and the fact that I was in school, they probably assumed that I did not have an end point because I loved school so much. But I was still a working student during my education. I did win several awards and earned scholarships, so I felt the pride beaming from my father, which I'm grateful for because he did motivate me to pursue my doctoral degree when I first told him that I applied. So I feel like I owe both him and my mother for helping me through school, even if it wasn't in a career that they would have wanted for me. But they did not pressure me to pursue a particular profession. In my early teaching career, I moved to deep South Texas, where I live now in the Rio Grande Valley, close to the border of Mexico. So now my population is majority Hispanic. But before I share more about my time down here in the RGV, I'll brief you on my experiences as an early worker. I quit my very first job, which was my only one in food services, after my boss walked into the kitchen and yelled, "Does anybody not know English around here?" Because most of us were people of color. My first full-time job, I worked at my local newspaper selling advertising, and my territories included the surrounding towns of my hometown, which was the county seat. So these were small, backwards cities that probably were not too familiar of my kind, and I just did not sit well with the tone of one of the small business owners who told me that he was not interested in buying from your paper. And I just did not feel comfortable going there again, to be quite honest. Then I worked in the healthcare industry, and at my hometown fitness club, I was expected to be the smartest person on staff with accounting and maintaining gym members' accounts because I was Asian and good at math. Yes, I may have been both, but that that shouldn't just mean that I have to be the one go-to person and everybody else's intellect should be underestimated. That should not be the case. When I moved to the valley, I did have a student who did the squinty eyes motion to me that I spoke of earlier. And I honestly have felt like I've experienced more discrimination living down south among more Hispanics than where I lived further up north. However, working in a global environment and furthering my education as well as furthering my career path may have been at my advantage for not being discriminated against as much. I could have easily been at a disadvantage for being a minority in professional settings as a female, person of color, Generation Y. However, here in this photo before the pandemic, when I did teach face to face, I took on a job as a college administrator and was the only person of color and female and a younger generation than my colleagues. I felt like I was started to be treated with more respect because I have my terminal degree and I had a higher position at the time. And when I did start teaching more online and exclusively at home, one of my students who is non-binary told me that they appreciate having a faculty member who, quote unquote, looks like me. And they were actually Korean American. I now feel more of a sense of belonging, hence the DEIB with Purdue Global than with any other employer. Not because I see more people of my ethnicity, which hint, hint, I would love for more Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to join the employee resource group that I hope we can start soon. But because our organizational culture embraces diversity and gives us the opportunity to use our voice. Now I want to hear about your own experience with model minority. Again, those of you who are on here live can feel free to drop into the chat box, or those of you who are watching the YouTube video, feel free to type into the comments whether you did go through a model minority experience yourself or whether you know anybody who has. Because bearing in mind PG's encouragement of us to exercise our voice, we do not have to suffer in silence. And how can we break this model minority cycle? Did any of us go through an intergenerational trauma where we felt pressure to follow a certain track, but we were passionate about something else? So in this case, it's a matter of us changing the narrative, creating our own story, pursuing our own desires, not others, defining our own success and fulfillment, whatever that may be. For some, it may mean making 6 or 7 or 8 figures a year. For some, it may mean having that inner peace. This is where my communication education comes in handy. There's a term that I teach about called intrapersonal communication, meaning communication within ourselves. And it goes hand in hand with AAPI this month, along with Mental Health Awareness Month also in May, where we exercise self-awareness, self-monitoring, and self-reflection, that we can be in tune with our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and how we can continue to grow and develop our own characters. How about you write down in the chat or in the comments, what is success to you? How have you been successful or your family's been successful? And for those of you who are parents and grandparents, how have the generations after you been successful? because in past generations, I've observed it to be more other imposed. My godmother, who is my oldest aunt on my mother's side, is a retired pediatrician. But she shared so many stories about our family on my maternal side and told me about how my grandmother came from a farming background and my grandfather came from fishery background, and they left their hometowns and pursued further education. My grandmother became a social studies teacher. My grandfather became a nurse, one of the few male nurses almost a century ago, but ultimately wanted to pursue medical doctor. He did not finish his medical degree, but he was a physical therapist. So his dream was to have an MD from his own family, and that became my aunt. However, my aunt wanted to become an architect. But just the other day, I had FaceTimed her and my mother the week after Mother's Day and the day before my mom's birthday, and my aunt told me that my grandparents had already come up with the careers that all of their children during the baby boomer era were going to work in. And I think about the Korean American culture, and any of you who watch this video or are tuning in live can correct me, but I've seen a tradition that takes place when a baby is dressed up and there are different symbols that represent various career paths in front of the child, and the object that the child picks up is the career path that they may be expected to follow. So if they pick up a stethoscope, they may pursue a career as a physician, or if they pick up a pencil, maybe as a writer, or an apple, perhaps as a teacher, or a gavel, maybe a lawyer or ultimately a judge. But my call to action to everybody here is that we pursue our professions based on our own passions and not for a predisposed will of somebody else's. Now, if we do follow a career path that somebody else wants us to follow, it's really up to us to make that decision if we want to also do it ourselves. I'm hoping we can break that cycle and give ourselves grace. Yet at the same time, let's not forget where we came from. Even though I have been Americanized, I still have retreated to the Philippines and immersed myself in the culture, even if it was stepping outside of my comfort zone and seeing primitive ways of living, including slaughtering of livestock, including goats or cows or pigs, and even consuming balut, which is a poultry embryo. I personally myself don't eat it, but this is the way that people may survive in my native land. There have also been times when we would go without electricity. I remember being at my maternal grandmother's house and we'd expect a brownout every day where we wouldn't be able to use the telephone, or when we had landlines, or in this case, no charging of the phones, or watching TV. When I'd visit my father's province, we would use a taboo, which is a bucket or a pail, in the bathroom in lieu of toilet paper. It would be like our own makeshift bidet toilet, but we would use another taboo when we would bathe ourselves instead of having running water from a shower head. Now, times have changed since I grew up going to the Philippines. There's more access to resources, including technology. Um, the malls may not always have the brownouts like they did when I used to go, but even with urbanization, I'm glad that there are places that aren't gentrified, that there are still places with open spaces and fresh air like my dad's province to just take in the nice fragrances. For those of you who may have tuned into my grief sensory healing session, I pointed out, just enjoying the great outdoors, including smelling and sightseeing and just enjoying that nature. We also don't want to forget from whom we came. When I was going through my PhD, after each semester, our professors would give us a pie chart to show us the percentage of how much of our degree we have already finished so far and how much we had left to go. So we had this tangible, concrete representation to go by. And there was this quote, we do it because it's hard. We do it to honor those who helped get us there, including our families. And that's why, even though I'm encouraging us to follow our paths with what we want to do instead of what others want to do, at the same time, we also want to honor our families who have influenced us and have supported us in our endeavors, whether it be financially or emotionally, preferably both. Of course, we don't always get both. We're not always privileged, and many times we may have to use self-motivation to get us as far as we have. But if we've had good examples in our lives, not just in career paths, but also in character, that should be what matters the most in terms of if we had a good family upbringing. I have various education levels and career paths from both sides of my family, from not finishing grade school all the way to earning terminal degrees, and from homemaker all the way to being medical doctors or PhDs or JDs, doctors of jurisprudence, for example. But I've also had some who, instead of a civilian life, served in the military, including multiple soldiers in the U.S. Army from my dad's side who went missing during the Bataan March during World War II. And that is an example of intergenerational grief that my paternal side of the family has gone through. And during the pandemic, another one of my cousins went missing, and we still don't know whether he's dead or alive. There have been no traces of him, and we've even gone to the news to broadcast about him being missing. I had a nephew who is was half Filipino American on my dad's side and half black on his dad's side, who was shot and killed 5 years ago as of last month, and that case has still gone cold. So we've had our share of grief. And speaking of grief, again, I address it in my latest book from Anak, which is called Cope with Hope, Deal to Heal, that partially covers grief diversity, including among Asian Americans. So those who attend our live presentation today will be selected at random for one chance to win. And if anybody comments on the YouTube video, then you also have a chance to win the free ebook. And here's more information about Anak. And for the YouTube version, I'll drop the links into the description box. And you can also scan the QR code to your right. And lastly, I dedicate this slideshow to my grandparents and great uncle Terry from the United States Navy, plus a Memorial Day tribute to our fallen heroes, including my aforementioned MIA POW, that's missing in action, prisoners of war relatives from the Bataan March during World War II. I also dedicate this slide deck to the memory of my babies whose special days happen to fall during the month of May, including Asia, Lilo, Angel Nevaeh, who is Anakako's namesake, and Divine Mercy. Now I'll open the floor for questions and comments from our live session and, of course, the comments from those who watched the YouTube video. And I call us to stir up a new narrative in our respective hot pots, whether they be ramen or boba tea. And cheers to Asian American and Pacific Islander month in May, Philippine Independence in June, and Filipino History Month in October, as we honor generations before us, but also honor ourselves. This is from my boiler cats to you. Enjoy stirring up your new narrative, and may you stay blessed. Thank you.